just spit in my gum, right?
Okay, so it looks like we are live. Hello, everyone. So I'm Melissa. I'm going to be moderating today's panel. I've had the good fortune of screening a film with the festival, so it's really a delight to be asked to have this conversation. Christine and Meghann, thank you so much for joining us. Just for the audience members out there, I'll give you just a brief introduction to these fabulous, fabulous women. So Christine is a multiple award-winning director who has developed and or directed various projects for HBO Films, Lionsgate, Universal Television, Warner Brothers, CBS, TV1, A&E, BET, list goes on, and has a production company called Faith Filmworks. Her film, The Clark Sisters, The First Ladies of Gospel, was nominated for 5 NAACP Image Awards, including Outstanding Directing in a TV Motion Picture for Christine. Congratulations. And a Critics' Choice Award nomination for Best TV Movie, which is incredible. Meghann is a poet and screenwriter, and according to her website, also a dog enthusiast. She was named the Best New Poet of 2018, in addition to several other prestigious awards. As a TV writer, her credits include Station 19 and Rebel, starring Katie Seagal. And I just read that you are now collaborating with Octavia Spencer and the Grey's Anatomy showrunner Krista Vernoff on a Hulu adaptation of a novel by Ashley Elston called First Lie Wins. That's super exciting. So we have a wealth of experience between you two in various capacities in the filmmaking world. It's really exciting to have you. So I guess the first question, and whoever wants to begin, is what was your journey to directing or writing for the screen?
Well, I'll jump in. I attended NYU Graduate Film School. Spike Lee was my directing teacher. I always had aspirations of being a director. When Spike Lee first spoke at the University of Notre Dame when I was a freshman, and I was a finance major, and I'm listening to this guy, and I'm like, people make movies for a living? So I promptly changed my major to film theory. And I did some research and understood that Spike Lee went to NYU. And I thought, oh, okay, so if I want to be a filmmaker, I need to go to NYU. Long story short, I went to NYU. He was my directing teacher in my last year. After I graduated, I raised a couple $1 million and went and made my first feature film starring Renee Elise Goldsberry, who is the original Angelica Schuyler in Hamilton. Yes. And I think in Girls 5 Eva, that's her latest show. Uh-huh. Anyway, I was on my way to being the next Spike Lee-ish type director, and starting from the indie world with the goal of moving on to studio films. And then I got pregnant with my first kid. And long story short, and 4 kids later, I was a stay-at-home mom for 15 years straight. So within the last 5 to 7 years, I kind of dabbled back into filmmaking. To date, now I have 6 feature films to my credit. And I've been directing television nonstop for the last 2 years. And I'm in the process of doing more feature films. Now, getting back in from post-motherhood was probably unnecessarily harder than it should have been. But that might be a whole conversation in and of itself. But I applied for the NBC Female Forward program. And the only reason why I applied for that was the only program that actually gave directors an episode to direct. Only did I get to shadow some directors on some shows, I was then handed my own show to direct. And just being given that opportunity really opened the floodgates to now being a working TV director. And so I call that my day job. And side job is pitching feature films that I have written or co-written to be made for the big screen. So I'm full on directing in the way that I had imagined, which is doing films, and in a way that I had not imagined, and that's directing television. So both of them are paths that I'm constantly pursuing, and the sky's the limit, I hope.
Cool. Thanks for sharing. And it's really inspiring to hear that you were able to take the time that you needed for yourself and for your family, and then still totally thrive in the direction, of your own dreams. So I'm sure for the moms out there, if you're thinking of the impossible feat of being a woman in this world and trying to have a family, if that is something that you desire, that you can make it work. So thank you. Meghann?
That is really exciting to hear. Also, even just being in this industry not very long, realizing that even having a personal life seems difficult sometimes. So it's really inspiring to hear your balance of personal and professional life. I think my journey is a little less conventional. I didn't study screenwriting or filmmaking in a university setting. I never really thought that I would get into this because it felt very scary, and it felt like this black box that I couldn't possibly, enter. It felt very far away. I was on the East Coast for most of my life, and this industry in Hollywood just felt almost imaginary in many ways. And I always wanted to be a writer. So I went to school for writing. I studied mostly poetry and prose, and it felt like a very safe, low stakes art form, in especially poetry, because it kind of felt more like a community of artists, and there wasn't a lot of and a little competition, but not a lot of intense competition. There's no industry behind it. So for a while, I was just pretty happy writing poems and getting published and making art that way. And when I realized that it was in direct conflict with having to, live a life and make money, it was. I decided to have, a few career pivots. I went and I learned how to code, and I became a coder for a little while, and realized I just had no time at night to kind of like moonlight as a writer, which was my plan. So I went back to grad school, and when I was in grad school, I started to write screenplays pretty intensely, and realizing that if I wanted to switch genres, I kind of had to kind of treat it like an Olympic training. So I wrote a pilot every 2 weeks. They were terrible, but I wrote a pilot every 2 weeks for maybe 6 or 7 months, just to kind of learn the form. And I read a bunch of pilots. I read a bunch of books on screenwriting, and I really dedicated every waking moment to trying to get good at it. And it just so happened that as that was happening, I had met someone in the industry, a writer that was willing to kind of give me notes and give me tips and mentor me in a way. So it's kind of like that, that saying, success is opportunity when it meets preparedness. Mm-hmm. And I ended up getting agents and getting a job through that mentorship and through that process. I hear more stories more and more as I'm hearing other people's origin stories. I hear a lot of similar people coming from different careers or different facets of life, that it's a similar path. But yeah.
I'm curious a little bit as a side note, the learning to code, do you feel like that has then helped in your writing in any capacity?
Yeah, I always say this, and it's surprising to people that I think that coding is really similar to poetry, and also similar to screenwriting, in that it's similar to screenwriting in that it's really collaborative. You have this one document in coding, and there are 5 or 6 people kind of messing with it and changing it all at once. And for that, in that way, it feels kind of communal and almost an amalgamation of everyone's ideas. And in poetry, the comparison that I find is that coding isn't binary. It's not one right answer or one wrong answer. It works or it doesn't work. That's the kind of baseline. But there's an editing process that happens with coding to make it more elegant. And that's what I find actually with screenwriting too, that you're trying to kind of in a very short scene, get across a very complicated emotion in each scene. And with each poem, it's this like little jewel of efficiency when it comes to, writing and words, and everything has to be kind of compact and precise. And that's the similarity that I find.
Cool. So Christine, you kind of answered my next question in that, like, what was the break-in then to TV? So, having participated in that program, that was definitely your bridge there, which seems like such a gift, especially since they gave you an episode to, to like really cut your teeth with. Meghann, so aside from the mentorship just with the writing, then what was the bridge to get staffed on your first show?
I feel very lucky in that my mentor ended up hiring me.
You. Great.
So that was it felt very easy, and I felt very grateful, but it was interesting because it was an extreme learning curve. I had never been on a set before. I was the person in the room raising my hand, asking like, what does that mean? What does this mean? There's a lot of like in any industry, like jargon and lingo that kind of in shorthand that comes with it. So it was about a year and a half of me kind of just learning and playing catch up.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So given both of you create from your own source and also, are hired for various things, I'm just curious what inspires you from like a source level, and what inspires you to say yes to a project that's, let's say, a director for hire or a writer for hire project?
Well, I can speak to why I took the job to do the Clark sisters, because in many ways I was on a very robust path of directing television shows, one after another. And I remember one of my colleagues saying to me, "You can't stop doing this to direct a Lifetime movie." And I remember feeling like in my gut, like, no, he's wrong. And I told him, I said, "But this is the Clark sisters." And he didn't understand that. But he did call me to say, after the huge, enormous success of the film, like, he was like, "You did a good job." So, but I was compelled to do that story because I'm from Detroit, Michigan, and the Clark sisters are a legendary gospel singing group from Detroit, Michigan. And the minute that I heard like it was going to be done on Lifetime, I thought, I think I can help this. If I, and by help, meaning my only goal and purpose was to rightfully showcase who these ladies were in a way that can be used powerfully in this medium. That's the only way I looked at it. So I'm led by what moves me and what inspires me. And if there's something that I'm reading on the page that hits me in the heart, then there's something that I can do visually. There's something that I can do aesthetically. There's something that I can do with crew, and there's something that I can do with actors to make this piece of work extraordinary. And that's my job. But I have to feel it, I think, make it extraordinary. But conversely, I'll say this, because I direct a lot of television, and you don't always feel something per se. And it's such a rapid pace and turnover in terms of scripts to screen. But I will tell you that I feel that my job as a director, as the visual interpreter of the context, I will always find something that I can hook into in a way that I can make the actors connect a little bit more emotionally or dramatically, and in a way that I can engage the crew more emotionally and dramatically. And that's something that I see on sets that don't happen regularly. Sometimes people just dial it in because this is just what they do. And I just allow that because I'm too fresh. I've just come from 15 years of motherhood. So I'm like this fireball on set, and I'm like we're going to find something that everybody can be enthusiastic about and make the work better than it is, or elevate the way that services the vision of the writer. So I look for that, even if it's not always there. I look for something that I can connect to that has a universal pull that everybody can contribute to in a way that elevates the work.
That's so cool. It's tough because, especially I'm thinking of TV, when you were saying, how you speak to actors, I'm an actor as well. And it feels like so often you show up to set, everything's moving parts, and there's not necessarily time to collaborate with directors. Right. And especially on network TV, there's definitely like a formula to the writing. And so you're kind of there to serve, which is awesome. But like it can be tough to translate that in a way. Right. So I'm just curious then if you have any great examples of how you work with actors in the moment within those constraints. Right.
So, first of all, I always like to have FaceTime with actors. You don't have a lot of time, but we're going to have met each other before we start the work, but we're going to meet each other and we're going to connect. So people say this, I don't say this about myself. They're like, you're an actor's director. And I'm like, I don't know what that means. I'm a director. And I think every director should be an actor's director. So I'm a feeling director. Okay. So, but I'm also very technically astute. So that's why like the crew and I get along great, because I speak their language, the language of the actors, not because I am an actor, but because I'm very much in tune with what actors are doing. So sometimes on sets, I don't know if you see this, they offer you, hey, do you want the minis? Those are the monitors. And I'm like, no, I cannot gauge a performance on mini monitors. So I use those primarily for stunts or technical kind of shooting. And then I need the big monitors. And I'm like this, I'm this close and glued to the performance. So what you're breathing, I'm seeing it. And if I don't believe it, and if I don't feel it, I'm that director that will constantly be on the set and I'm in your ear. And I was directing an episode of MacGyver, and the lead actor on MacGyver, I kept running back and forth from the monitor. I'm like, now try this. What about this? Can you look here? And listen to her when she says that line. And then he stopped and he stared at me. I'm like, what? What's the matter? He's like, I've never had a director talk to me. And I was like, you are kidding.
Yeah.
I'm the director. You cannot shut up. And I'm very quick about it in a way, even all the actors understand. Like sometimes when the actors want to get into a brouhaha about what they're not going to do, I have always found that once they understand where I come from, I can grab their hand and say, hey, I just need you to do this and do it this way. Okay, I'll give you that. I'll give you that. So there's this sense of camaraderie that I like to build, but it comes from authenticity and truly paying attention to what actors are saying and doing. And if I don't believe it, I will call it out. And I think most actors appreciate that you're paying attention, that you can get adjustments quickly and they're willing to. So that's what I do. And that comes from filmmaking, right? Because there's a great sense of ownership about everything that happens on the screen. Well, that's the part of filmmaking that I apply to television directing that I won't stop doing. And TV people are not used to that. Right. So, so actors stand up straighter. Like when I show up, oh, Christine's back. Glad to have you back, because they know I pay attention to them. They know I care about them. And I will always protect their performances and their emotions behind it and what they think and believe. Like we can have discussions about, I think I should do this. And even when I want you to do that, but I listen and I'm like, you know what, you're coming from a perspective that's really informed. I want to see it. So let's give it a try. And it's that collaboration that I set off from the top. And that's the difference. And I care. So that's it. I care.
Such a gift. Yeah. Meghann.
I love that. I really want to work with you now.
I know, right?
The first question that you asked, can you remind me what it was? The difference between...
Yes. In terms of, the difference between saying yes or creating from your own self or source, right? And you as a poet, right? That so much of that comes from your own self versus saying yes to a project and what really inspires you to do either.
Interesting. Yeah. I think that definitely the work has to speak to me. And it's interesting because I'm working on a show on these shows that I really love, and I really love the content, but it's definitely different from how I work and what I work on in isolation and personally, and the projects that I would like to kind of push forward on my own. I think I'm writing a lot of like science fiction right now, which is kind of in contrast to some of the shows that I'm working on, just genre wise. So then saying yes to this other project that I'm collaborating with Krista and Octavia on, it felt like a step toward what I would like to. It's interesting because you're not never, but I feel like it's very rare that you get to write exactly what you want to write, because there are so many voices and so many notes and so many different people that kind of end up collaborating on it, and it makes it, I think, better in the long run, but it's never yours in isolation. And this other project felt like a step toward what I ultimately, if I were alone in a room, what I would write. So that felt very nice. It felt like just like a step closer to that moment when you're alone in a room and you're writing something and you're like, this is so weird, and like I've never seen this before, and this is a show that I would like to watch. And just things that excite you, that give you that like guttural, like floaty, fluttery feeling in your heart. It's kind of like, it's like it's a kind of like love that you have to recognize in art. And then like it's hard to kind of describe when you sit across the room from a person and you're on a date and you get that fluttery feeling. Can't really articulate why exactly this person has given you that feeling. It's similar with art. I don't really know why, it just does.
Yeah. Do you feel like there's any sort of thematic through line in terms of those pieces for you?
Yeah, I think that I really respond to female characters that I haven't seen before. I really like to see women that are like flawed and messy and strange. I also am, like many women, obsessed with true crime. Working through it on in therapy. I really love a mystery, and I think that my feeling is that every story, regardless of what it is, what genre, is and should be a mystery. So when a story, it could be a love story, it could be a biography, it could be anything, but if it doesn't have a mystery element to it, or at least the inclination of a mystery, then it doesn't really pull me.
Cool. Thanks. So Hollywood, Hollywood, the past couple of years, is trying, right, to prioritize diversity inclusion, which is a wonderful thing. And there's a difference between, what we're reading and what we're actually experiencing. So I'm just curious, with, you two having boots on the ground, what's going on with that?
I think Hollywood doesn't necessarily always know what to go in per se, because Hollywood is not run by artists. So It's not led by those kind of warm and fuzzy feelings. It's led by the bottom line. And that's a part of the reality that artists have to accept, or you will get swept up and pretty much discouraged if you don't really understand the business behind how things work. So it's not, we can't look at this as like they're the enemy, because I don't think that's the case. I think, right, in like if something made $1 gazillion and only like Chinese women made that, trust me, Hollywood would be making a gazillion dollars worth of Chinese women's stuff. So this is just kind of like a no-brainer that way. Regarding diversity and inclusion, and people participating in spaces in Hollywood, that's another kind of a discussion, because it's an industry that's been running the way it has been for maybe over 150 years or something like that. And what I've kind of discovered is that people have not been used to different looking people on sets. And you can still, like most of the sets that I work on, easily over 80% white men. That if that's how it's been, then, and it's still like that, then the change is going to be just harder to accept for the people who have been holding those spaces forever. But the change is inevitable, because I know I've been on certain shows where there's a mandate that it has to be 50% of the directors have to be diverse. But I think that's just scratching the surface, because really, why not 50% of the whole crew as well being diverse? And I think people are aiming towards that, and there's a disgruntled disruption happening, because everyone feels entitled to the space they have held for 100 years. So what I'm seeing is that, and interestingly, a filmmaker, Tyler Perry, said something to the effect that Black people are not ready for the opportunities in Hollywood. And if they're if they're not ready, they shouldn't take the spaces that white people already hold. And I'm thinking, like, how ridiculous is that? Because how do you get experience unless you're in those spaces? And I promise you, all those white folks in those spaces didn't come in 100% experience. They learned on the job. And in many ways, come on, Tyler Perry, you're still learning. So you pull the ladder down from people that are coming from behind you, because you've achieved some success without being ready yourself. Yeah, I said it. So felt strongly about. So I'm personally an advocate for diversity in these spaces. I have taught like writing workshops, but now, given my depth of experience as a TV director and as a film director, I can teach women in terms of how you need to appear ready, because half of it is just optics. So there's that, but that conversation needs to happen on being prepared to be on a set where you're going to be the minority and you're going to be judged for having taken that space away from somebody else, even though you're not ready. So my thing is, you got to just go in there anyway, and you got to learn the ropes. And those opportunities should be afforded to a diversity of people. I'm a big advocate for Black women, because it's so hard, period. But being a Black woman, I think I can speak to some of the landmines that maybe women overall can avoid in dealing with crews that are 80% men and white men. So, and mind you, I have a love fest with the crews. So that means I get along with white men. That's not the issue, because once they see you know what you're doing, they will get behind you 150%. So that is not the issue. But as I pinpointed the issues that exist, I just think they can be addressed. It doesn't always have to be public, but even on a one-on-one basis. I'm always open to talking to people about what landmines to avoid and what optics to focus on. So a lot of those kind of conversations need to happen, but most times people have to be thrown in and learn the system, like I did and everyone else does.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of feels like, Meghann, how you were thrown into the writer's room, right? Like that.
Yeah. And no one said to me, you're taking up some space. It was given in good faith, and that it's everything you said is so interesting and important. I feel lucky because my first job was in Shondaland, and I think that Shondaland, and I don't know, but what I've been told, it's a little different and a little better than some other production companies when it comes to diversity. And there have been so many times when I'm sitting in Video Village, and they're my favorite times, when a new director will come and sit down. And Video Village usually consists of a scriptee, a director, a writer, maybe on set, a producer, and a new director will come and sit down and look around and be like, this is all women. This is the first time I've ever been in a all female Video Village. And it's like, it's an amazing experience. They're my favorite times. And I think that it's the best kinds of collaboration when it's all women behind those monitors. And I think that I don't know if it happens quite as often in other places as it does in Shondaland, but I really love it. And I had an interesting perspective shift recently on one of our shows. We had a change in management, I guess you would say. One of our number 2 writers was a white woman, and she left the show, and another woman came in who was a Grey's Anatomy writer, and I had known for years, and she's a Black woman. And just to have but before, the room dynamic it didn't have diversity in leadership. And I can't tell you how much more lovely it is to have her in leadership, because from seeing some of my coworkers that I love so much feel more comfortable calling things out and saying, that's not authentic, or this, I bump against this isn't right from my lived experience. Let me tell you, it feels like it just really solidified to me how important it is not only to have diversity. I think that is obvious, but the next step of that is to have diversity in leadership. And it's made our script so much stronger. It's made our characters so much more vibrant. It's made everyone's sense of humor come out in a really lovely way. It's kind of like a night and day experience. And I think that is, I don't know, a conversation that I hear often, that there should be diversity, but I think that should be reframed in diversity in leadership.
Cool, thank you. So all of our filmmakers here are trying to pave our own ways, right? And I guess from your experience, where do you see, and I know this inside my heart, but the value in creating your own work? And then as someone who is in that space, in the more independent landscape, who seeks to bridge to Hollywood space, do you have advice on how to do that appropriately?
I think in many ways, sometimes when talent is undeniable, then and you have it, that's what you bring to the table, and you work with other artists and craftsmen and women, and try to create the best work that you can. Now, again, independent studio, there's no difference, because Hollywood now is so wide open in terms of streamers, theatrical, and what have you, that the bottom line, remember, is profitability.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if I just wanted to be an artist and create films that just move me, then that's a hobby.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to work within the system that we work in, you can't just do things as a hobby. You have to do things that move the needle, whether in terms of ratings and whether in terms of critical reviews and profitability. So I would say to people who are trying to get into this industry, be mindful of that. Be
Mm-hmm.
mindful and know, when I work on a TV set, I'm very mindful of schedule and time. because every time that I go over schedule, that's going to add money to the budget. So do what you need to do within the time that you've been given, but be excellent and move the needle aesthetically. So if you can do that and also mind how you work in these spaces in an efficient way, then the producers love you, then the showrunners love you, and they call you back, and then you work consistently. Not because you're special, and even talent is debatable in television. I often tell people I could direct something for a day, and then if I passed out on set, they will drag me to the side, right? And you better believe the AD, the crew, and the actors will keep going.
Yeah.
That is how non-important a director be, like in the greater scheme of things in television. But it's really about, can you help contribute to the moving train that's already there, and then you add what you can to bring value to it. So it's so multi-tiered. But I wanted to add this experience, because as Meghann was speaking, like she's in the video village and there's like all these women, and I've had that experience, and it's sublime. But as of late, I have been working on like a show. I've been working in the All-American universe. So it's All-American, All-American Homecoming. And like, I've worked with 3 to 4 Black male writers. And I have to say this as a mother of 3 sons, and 3 Black sons and my Black husband. One of the greatest experiences I've ever had was working with all these Black male writers. And never threatened that I'm a female director, but every time enthusiastic about, wow, Christine, I'm so excited about what you're going to do with my episode, and working in tandem to create something sublime. And that has always been my experience with each of these writers, and Black women writers. And it's in the All-American universe run by Nkechi Carroll. It's as diverse as it should be and be. So it's just seeing the spectrum of people who have not consistently held these spaces and excelling is really the goal. Not just to be diverse for diversity's sake, but it's that we're all moving the needle in the right direction and doing works of excellence. And I also feel where there are primarily Black actors, when I show up, a lot of Black actors don't get to work with Black directors, and then a Black female director. And when there are Black female actors and they see that there's a Black female director who knows what she's doing, they now can put their guards down and do the work. And do the work, as opposed to managing like microaggressions from everywhere. So my job is to protect the actor, so they can do the best work that they can, and protect the crew, so they can do the best work that they can. So I'm really a glorified babysitter, and that skill set that people, if you want to come into the industry, you have to learn how to manage people. It's great to be an artist. It's great to be creative. If you cannot manage people and emotions, you're gonna fail, because implosions happen all the time, but they come from a human element most times. So you have to learn how to deal with the human element, I think, to be successful in this realm.
Thanks.
That's so interesting when you say you're a glorified babysitter, which I don't think is true, but it made me think like, oh, wow, I haven't heard mothers talk about how motherhood made them better at their jobs. And it's the way that you were speaking about, like, managing emotions and nurturing, and it feels like that experience just could maybe, not to speak for you, has maybe made it better for you.
For sure.
So interesting. The question though, was how to break in, or any advice on how to break in?
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of segueing between, creating your own work, showing, you have a film in this lovely festival, and there seems to be some sort of desire, amongst many people, a frustration and desire to like bridge the gap there between creating independently and creating within the infrastructure of like a Hollywood system, for example.
Yeah, in my experience, I think just I'm always when I was trying to break in, it was a constant question for me whether or not to work on one script and make it perfect. And as you know, you could work on these scripts and work on your art forever and ever. There's never a done moment. You never feel as though it's always done. Or the other, which is to create many different kinds of work. And I think that the what I kind of fell to, and what I think what worked for me, was instead of obsessing and perfecting one, was to kind of make my portfolio as vast as I could. So I had a drama, I had a horror film, I had a sci-fi, I had a comedy, and I had all of these ideas also going into meetings. I had like maybe 10 other ideas and log line pitches for other things. So there was never a moment for someone to say, or an agent to say, well, like, we don't really do this, or we're really looking for this other thing. I could be like, well, I have, this idea and this idea that kind of fits into that world. I also am really interested in this other thing. So just to be able to hone what I think is really important for any writer specifically, and maybe everyone else in this machine of creation, is to just be curious and to really let your curiosity create your body of work for you, instead of thinking that one thing has to be, especially for specifically a portfolio, that one thing has to be perfect.
Cool. So I think probably final question. What are you most excited for next? And to kind of deepen that, I think, and maybe help some of our aspirants out there, are there perceived obstacles that you see to arriving at that? And third part, in a perfect world in which there were no obstacle to you arriving at that, what would be your next step?
Well, I'm always excited about the opportunities that I've gotten to direct certain shows that constantly surprise me in terms of the creativity, like P-Valley, and working with Pulitzer Prize winner Katori Hall. Well, I've never read writing that sublime, and then the challenge of bringing that out visually, and having the creative push from the showrunner to be as creative as you want to be. So that kind of storytelling is great and fun. So more of that, on the TV side. I'm excited on the film side of finally doing some projects that I wrote and work with some stellar people that because of my work on the Clark sisters, they're like, oh my goodness, what are you doing next? Let's work together. So that's exciting. Whether it's on an independent scale or the studio scale, because I talk to investors all the time. I'm pitching this. So to me, it doesn't matter, because if I make it independently, it'll end up on the studio side. And if I make it on the studio side, it'll get out to the masses in the way that studios can do. So that's exciting. And ultimately, the only thing that stops me from doing all the creative things that I can do on the film side is financing. So that's half my conversations. Like, who's going to finance this? The rest, in terms of getting talent, that's been a lot easier for me. I have, a storehouse of people that I can reach out to who are willing and ready to do something in the film realm. So that's the only obstacle, or meeting with a visionary executive who gets it. And remember, I said most of Hollywood is run by Wall Street folks, not artists. But every now and then you meet somebody who is there because they love the artistry of storytelling. So I'm looking for that person all the time. So it's constantly taking meetings and seeing who you can connect with, who get that. And then on the TV directing side, is working with like visionary showrunners like Katori Hall, like Monica Maester, like Nkechi Carroll, who are doing great things on the TV side and creating hit shows. And then, and let me just say, those three women called me personally. They saw Clark Sisters and called me personally and said, can you please direct an episode of television? So it's like they're breaking the model of going through an agent to get booked on a job, and they're just reaching out to visionary filmmakers and storytellers to direct on their show and elevating their TV shows on the level in which that I work as a filmmaker. So I don't see obstacles. I just see detours, so maybe not here, then go there. So that's my job constantly as an artist, is to find a path of least resistance to do the work that I've been put here on earth to do.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, it's such an interesting question. I think that every writer has their idea for a show and they can see it in their head, and it seems very clear in one's head, but then to go through all the steps of what it takes to even get someone else to agree to make that show seems very, very, very daunting, because there's so many steps and so many moments in which it can get kind of like tossed away. But the first step, which I don't have very much experience in at all, is pitching. And I think that it's really an interesting exercise that they make us writers do, because most of us are extreme introverts, and they're asking us to go in a room and like kind of put on a show in so many ways. And a lot of the advice that I've gotten from people that I know who have made their own shows is just treat it like you're like on stage and it's a one-man show and you're like acting, you're performing. And I was like, that seems horrifying. Like, that's not at all what I want to do. So that seems for me personally like an obstacle in public speaking and extroversion and performance, and also in just like really being able to kind of like be almost like a little bit of a salesperson. It's a counterintuitive skill. I don't think it's just me. I think many writers also feel like this, and some writers come from acting. Some writers, I know an ex-lawyer that used to be a trial lawyer, which is a kind of performance. So there are other ways to get it into writing that I think that lend to this. But I think a lot of us are a little terrified of pitching and doing that publicly. So that's interesting. And another one, speaking of finance, is I am interested in directing, and I think that it's very cool and something that I would like to exercise. And a step to get to that level is to make your own short film, which has its own, mysteries of, how to hire people and how to actually direct it. But then on top of it is who's going to pay for this, how to raise money, how to either convince someone to give you money or to raise it yourself. And that is an entirely different skill set than I have been currently honing. So that's another venture.
Well, thank you so much for this conversation. You're both extraordinary women, and it's honestly like the biggest pleasure for me to have this conversation with you and share it with the audience of Imagine This. Feel free if there's any final words that you want to offer to our fabulous filmmakers out there, please do. Yeah.
I'd say that if you're going to be a filmmaker, if you're going to be a director, directors direct. This is what I say about writers. Like, if you're a real writer, writers write. Mm-hmm. So there's no time that you take off that you're not writing if you're a writer. And the same with directing. Like, I've had opportunities to do short films consistently, and I'm in between episodic and feature films. So it's like, who has time to do short films? Well, if I can make time, and I recently did a short film with Anjanou Ellis, and we decided to make a short film about Fannie Lou Hamer as a proof of concept for a feature film. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, we only did it as a proof of concept, but now it's that proof of concept has gotten us financing for the feature film. So my thinking is, if you're going to tell stories visually, then you need to tell stories visually and practice. So when you get the call, if you're lucky to get the call to direct whether an episodic or a feature film, you have had practice telling stories visually first and foremost, and you can interpret what's on the page and raise the aesthetic in a level that people care with the product or with the story that you end up making. So practice your craft.
Thank you. I guess we'll leave it at that. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.